Not by choice. Never by choice. In the dying light of the 23rd century, humanity had learned what it meant to kneel, but when the stars themselves turned hostile, when ships descended from the void with weapons that could crack continents and technology that rendered human innovation laughable, choice became a luxury reserved for the dead. The sovereignty had come 40 years ago. That was what they called themselves, the Krythosian Sovereignty. A galactic empire, spanning 1,200 worlds, ruling with the cold precision of machines and the arrogance of gods. They had not asked permission to claim Earth. They had simply taken it. Humanity's militaries had fought back. Of course, they always did. Fighter jets screamed across burning skies. Nuclear warheads bloomed like funeral flowers against energy shields that never flickered. Soldiers died by the millions. Their courage measured not in victories but in how long they delayed the inevitable. 3 months. That was how long Earth's resistance lasted. But the Krythosians had made one critical error. 3 months before the surrender, before the occupation, before humanity was catalogued, sorted, and assigned its place in the galactic order, a primitive species on a death world, useful only for labor and experiment. They had assumed that breaking humanity's armies meant breaking humanity's spirit. The city of New Jakarta sprawled beneath a sky choked with smoke and industrial haze. Once it had been a gleaming metropolis of glass towers and vertical gardens. Now it was a scar, a wound that refused to heal. Krythosian patrol ships drifted overhead like mechanical vultures, their anti-gravity engines humming a constant oppressive dirge. In the shadow of what had once been a university, a man named Dalton Cross stood with his hands bound behind his back. He was 43 years old, lean, weathered. His face was a map of violence, scars crossed his jaw. His nose had been broken twice, and his left eye carried a faint cloudiness from an injury that had never quite healed. Once he had been a colonel in the United Earth Defense Force. Now he was simply prisoner 7043 Delta, awaiting execution for the crime of insurgent activity. The firing line stood before him, 6 Krythosian soldiers, their exoskeletons gleaming like beetle carapaces, their plasma rifles charged and aimed. A voice crackled from the lead soldier's helmet, cold, synthetic, utterly devoid of emotion. Dalton didn't look at them. Instead, he stared past the barricades, past the scorched ruins of the campus, toward the distant mountains where rumors said free humans still hid. Prisoner 7743 Delta, you have been found guilty of inciting rebellion, sabotage of sovereignty infrastructure, and the murder of 3 enforcement officers. By decree of Supreme Arbiter Kalamazith, you are sentenced to immediate termination. Do you wish to speak final words? Dalton smiled. It was a slow, dangerous thing, the smile of a man who knew something his executioners did not. Yeah, he said, his voice rough but steady. Tell your arbiter, we're just getting started. The lead soldier tilted his head, processing this. Then he raised one clawed hand. Execute. The explosion that followed was not loud. The ground beneath the soldiers erupted in a chain of white-hot detonations, shaped charges hidden weeks ago by operatives Dalton had never met, never known, but had always trusted. The Krythosian soldiers were thrown like ragdolls, their armor cracking, their bodies engulfed in flames. It was everything. Dalton hit the ground hard, rolling as gunfire erupted from the surrounding ruins. Human fighters, dirty, desperate, armed with scavenged weapons, poured from hidden positions, their war cries raw and primal. A woman appeared beside him, slicing through his restraints with a plasma cutter. She was young, maybe 25, with short, cropped black hair and eyes that burned with something beyond rage. Who? Colonel, she said, her accent thick. Russian. Maybe. Ukrainian. We move. Now. Dalton ran. Battalion Remnant, 4th Division. Lieutenant Kira Volkov. Questions later. Run now. Behind them the city burned. Krythosian Command Vessel Eternal Verdict, 300 light-years away. Supreme Arbiter Kalamazith stood in the observation chamber. 6 of his 8 limbs folded behind his carapace, his compound eyes reflecting the holographic star maps that floated before him. Humanity, he had believed, would be no different. He was old by human standards, impossibly so. By Krythosian measure he was in his prime, 240 cycles, His chitin still hard, his mind still sharp. His species had evolved on a world of crushing gravity and toxic atmospheres, where only the strong survived and weakness was pruned with surgical efficiency. The sovereignty had been his life's work. He had expanded it from 300 worlds to 1,200. He had subdued 47 species, integrated them into the Empire's industrial machine, and turned chaos into order. The hologram before him flickered, displaying a new report, another human insurgency cell uncovered, another facility sabotaged, another patrol ambushed in the ruins of what they called Sydney. 17 incidents this month alone. A voice interrupted his thoughts, soft, feminine, laced with curiosity. They resist still. Kilmazet turned. Behind him stood Lysara, his intelligence officer. She was smaller than him. Her carapace, a deep emerald rather than his obsidian black. Her eyes sharper and more calculating. They always resist at first, Kilmazet said, his voice a series of clicks and modulated tones translated by neural implants. It is instinct, fear of change. They will adapt. Kilmazet made a dismissive gesture. They are carbon-based bipeds with fragile bones and inefficient respiratory systems. They should have died out millennia ago. Will they? Lysara stepped closer, her antennae twitching. I have studied their history, Arbiter. They are unusual, even for a Death World species. And yet they didn't. Eliza. Lysara pulled up another hologram, images of human soldiers fighting with broken weapons, medics operating in collapsed buildings, civilians smuggling food through sewers. They fought wars against each other for thousands of cycles. Wars that should have ended them. Nuclear fire, biological plagues, atrocities that would break most species. And they kept breeding, kept building, kept fighting. Lysara's eyes glimmered. Other species surrender when their armies fall. Humans, they don't have an off switch. I've reviewed interrogation data. Do you know what one of them said when asked why he continued resisting after his entire unit was killed? And Kilmazet said nothing. Finally, Kilmazet spoke. Increase enforcement presence in all major population centers. Implement Protocol 17, collective punishment for insurgent activity. For every sovereignty soldier killed, execute 10 human civilians in public view. He said, because fuck you, that's why. A long silence filled the chamber. Good. Kilmazet's mandibles clicked sharply. Let them see the cost of defiance. Let them learn fear. If they are as resilient as you claim, then we will test that resilience until it breaks. Lysara hesitated. That will escalate. He turned back to the star maps, dismissing her. But Lysara did not leave immediately. She stood there, staring at the images of humans fighting, dying, and somehow impossibly still standing. Not pity. For the first time in her long career, she felt something unfamiliar. Doubt. Back on Earth. Sector 7. The wastes. Dalton sat in the makeshift command bunker, deep beneath what had once been a shopping district. The walls were concrete and rebar, reinforced with scavenged alloy plating. The air smelled of oil, sweat, and something else. Something indefinable that every soldier recognized. Kira Volkov stood across from him, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Desperation. You're the Colonel Cross? She asked. The one from the Singapore offensive. Dalton nodded slowly. That was a long time ago. You held the line for 6 days. Against orbital bombardment. Against void-borne shock troops. 6 days. And then we lost. But you held. Kira leaned forward. That's why we pulled you out. That's why the Remnant voted to risk 23 operatives to save one old man. Dalton met her eyes. I'm no savior, Lieutenant. I'm a relic. You're a symbol. Another voice, deeper, rougher, came from the doorway. A massive man ducked into the room, his head nearly scraping the ceiling. He was built like a freight truck, his arms scarred and tattooed, his bald head marked with burn scars. Commander Booker Kane, Kira said. 4th Battalion Remnant. We're planning something big, Kane interrupted. Something that'll make the bastards bleed. But we need someone who knows how to turn rage into strategy. Someone who can unite the cells. Kane grinned. showing missing teeth. We don't do rank much anymore, Colonel, but we do remember heroes, and we need one right about now. Dalton shook his head. I'm not. How many cells are left? Dalton asked quietly. Kane and Kira exchanged glances. 47 confirmed, Kira said. Maybe more in hiding. Total fighting strength, 3,000, give or take. Yeah, Kane's grin widened. Shit odds, just how we like it. Dalton laughed, a bitter hollow sound. 3,000, against a galactic empire. Dalton looked between them, then down at his hands scarred, trembling slightly from adrenaline. He thought of the soldiers he'd led, the ones who'd died believing their sacrifice mattered. He thought of the firing line, the smile he'd given, the words he'd spoken. Maybe, he thought, it was time to make those words true. We're just getting started. All right, he said finally. Show me what you've got. The hologram flickered to life, a massive structure orbiting Earth, visible even from the surface, a ring of metal and energy that hummed with power. The harvest platform, Kira said quietly. They're stripping our oceans, mining our core, pulling resources to fuel their empire, and killing millions in the process. Kane added, earthquakes, tsunamis, atmospheric collapse in some regions. Dalton stared at the image. You want to destroy it. We want to send a message, Kira corrected. We're planning simultaneous strikes across 12 cities. Sabotage, assassinations, chaos. But the real target is the platform, Dalton finished. You hit that, you cut off their resource flow. You prove we're still dangerous. Exactly. Dalton was silent for a long moment. Outside, in the ruins of New Jakarta, the first stars began to appear through the smoke, and somewhere, far above, the Krythosian ships hummed their mechanical hymns, unaware that beneath them, humanity's last battalion was preparing to ignite a fire that would burn across the stars. Then he looked up and his eyes were hard. When do we start? Krythosian Enforcement Garrison, former Melbourne. 18 days later. The screams had stopped 3 hours ago. That should have been a relief. Instead, it made everything worse. Captain Vrelikoth stood in the interrogation chamber, his breathing apparatus hissing softly, his compound eyes reflecting the broken body suspended in the containment field. The human, a male identification stripped away, hung motionless. Blood dripped from his fingertips in a slow, steady rhythm. He told us nothing, said the interrogator, a smaller Krythosian with specialized sensory appendages designed to detect lies. Neural scans confirm he does not know the location of other cells. He was compartmentalized, expendable. Vrelikoth clicked his mandibles in frustration. Then why resist? Why endure this? The interrogator tilted his head. Unknown. Pain tolerance among humans exceeds expected parameters. This one's cardiovascular system should have failed 2 hours ago. Yet he persisted. Did he say anything? Yes. The interrogator checked his data tablet. When asked why he would not surrender information to save himself, he said, and I translate loosely, because you're going to die screaming and I want to be there to see it. Then he turned and left the chamber. Vrelikoth stared at the broken human. Behind him, the body finally went still. The garrison command center was chaos. Holographic displays flickered with incoming reports. 2 supply convoys ambushed in the Australian wastes. A patrol squad found dead in the subterranean tunnels beneath former Tokyo. Their armor melted by improvised thermite charges. An orbital communications relay sabotaged, leaving an entire sector blind for 17 minutes. Vrelikoth watched the reports scroll past, feeling something he had not felt in decades. 17 minutes was enough for 3 more attacks. Unease. No. Rexenil pulled up a map, highlighting attack patterns. This is different. Someone's unified them. Someone with military training. Someone who understands our protocols. They're coordinating, said Lieutenant Drexnell, his tactical officer. The attacks are simultaneous, precision timing. This isn't random insurgency. This is organized warfare. We knew they had cells, Vrelikoth replied. Scattered remnants. The 2 Krythosians stared at the map. Then an alarm shrieked. Incoming transmission, the communications officer announced. Human origin. Piggybacking on our encrypted channels. How is that possible? Put it through, Relikoth ordered. The hologram shifted. A human face appeared, scarred, weathered, eyes burning with cold fury. Attention, Krythosian Sovereignty forces, Dalton said, his voice transmitted across every military channel on the planet. My name is Colonel Dalton Cross, United Earth Defense Force. You may remember that name. You should. Dalton Cross. Relikoth felt his carapace tighten. For 40 years you've occupied our world, killed our people, stripped our planet. You've told yourselves we're primitives, animals, that we'd eventually learn our place. Dalton leaned closer to the camera. You were wrong. What you're about to experience, Dalton continued, is something your empire has never faced. You've conquered species who surrendered when their armies fell, who knelt when their cities burned. You've never fought a species that was born in fire. Behind him, explosions bloomed across the Melbourne skyline. The transmission cut to footage, Krythosian patrols ambushed, supply depots destroyed, soldiers dragged into darkness by human fighters who appeared and vanished like ghosts. We are humanity, Dalton said. And we don't kneel, we don't break. We don't stop. His eyes seemed to bore through the screen. So here's your choice. Leave our world. Return to whatever hell spawned you. Or stay and learn what it means to fight a species that has spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing. Silence filled the command center. The transmission ended. Then Relikoth spoke, his voice low and dangerous. Sir, Drexenwell hesitated. That will turn the civilian population fully against us. They already are. Belaka's voice echoed through the chamber. Deploy everything. Ground forces. Orbital strikes. Burn their cities if you must. I want this ended. Find him. Find them all. Authorization for lethal force against any human combatant or suspected collaborator. No prisoners. No mercy. Across the planet, Krythosian forces mobilized, and in the depths of forgotten bunkers, ruined cities, and mountain caves, humanity's last battalion prepared to meet them. Sector 12. The Underground. 48 hours before the assault, they were a motley collection. Former soldiers, ex-engineers, doctors turned saboteurs, scientists who'd learned to build bombs instead of futures. Different languages, different backgrounds, united only by rage and desperation. The war room was carved from solid rock, lit by scavenged LEDs and powered by a jury-rigged fusion cell that hummed ominously in the corner. Around the table sat the leaders of humanity's remaining resistance cells. Dalton stood at the head of the table, his hands braced on the holographic map. The harvest platform, he said, pointing to the massive ring orbiting Earth. It's their lifeline. Everything they extract from our world gets processed there before shipment to the Empire. Minerals, water, atmosphere. They're bleeding us dry, and that station is the wound. Kira Volkov tapped the map, zooming in. Security is absolute. Energy shields. Automated defense turrets. Garrison of 300 soldiers. Direct assault is suicide. Good thing we're not planning a direct assault, Kane rumbled. He pulled up a secondary display. Shipping manifests, cargo schedules, patrol rotations. Every 72 hours they bring up a shipment from the surface. Heavy transports. Automated mostly, but still require Krythosian oversight. You want to hijack a transport, said another voice. Dr. Amara Okonkwo, former astrophysicist, now the Remnant's chief technician. She was a small woman with graying hair and hands that never stopped moving. And ride it straight into the station. Exactly. That's insane. Yeah, Kane grinned. But it'll work. Amara shook her head. Even if you get aboard, the station's reactor is buried deep, surrounded by redundant systems. You'd need someone who understands Krythosian technology. We have someone, Kira interrupted. She nodded toward the corner of the room. A figure stepped forward, and the temperature seemed to drop. It was a Krythosian. The room exploded into shouting. Smaller than most, carapace, mottled with scars, one of her sensory appendages missing. Her designation translated through her collar implant was Lysara. A fucking bug? This is a trap. She's one of them. Silence. Enough! Dalton's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. He looked at Lysara. Explain. Now. Lysara's translator crackled. I am Defector. Intelligence officer, I studied your species. Learned your history. Your wars, your capacity for both creation and destruction. She paused, and I concluded that the sovereignty's occupation of Earth is incorrect. Yes. Lysara met his gaze without flinching. My species has committed atrocities. I do not deny this, but I have also seen what you are capable of, not just violence, though you excel at that, but adaptation, resilience. You should not exist. Your world should have killed you. Instead, it made you stronger. Incorrect? Kane's voice was venomous. You killed billions. She turned to Dalton. I believe the sovereignty will fall. Not today. Perhaps not tomorrow, but you will find a way. You always do. And when that happens, I want to have been on the right side. Dalton studied her for a long moment. Can you get us inside the platform? Yes. Yes. Can you disable the reactor? Will you? Yes. Lysara's mandibles clicked slowly, an expression Dalton had learned meant determination. Dalton looked around the room, saw the hatred, the distrust, but also the desperate hope. She comes with us, he said finally. And if she betrays us, I'll kill her myself. No one argued. Transport Bay 7. Surface level. 40 hours later. The cargo transport was massive. A flying warehouse, essentially, designed to haul raw materials from Earth's surface to the harvest platform. Its hull was scarred and pitted from atmospheric entry, its engines roaring like dying gods. Dalton crouched in the shadows with Kira, Kane, Amara, and Lysara, watching as Krythosian dockworkers loaded the final cargo containers. 30 seconds, Kira whispered, checking her chronometer. Kane hefted his weapon, a modified plasma rifle, cobbled together from stolen Krythosian tech and human ingenuity. I still don't trust the bug. Noted, Dalton replied. 20 seconds. Lysara's antennae twitched. The guard rotation will change in 18 seconds. We have a 7-second window. That's tight, Amara muttered. It's what we have. 10 seconds. Dalton felt his heartbeat slow, felt the familiar cold settle over him. The state he'd learned long ago when bullets were flying and death was certain. The place where fear became 5. Now. The guards turned, beginning their patrol shift. They moved like ghosts. Silent, precise, lethal. Kane took point, his massive frame moving with surprising grace. Kira followed, her blade finding a guard's throat before he could cry out. Amara planted a bypass device on the cargo door, its interface lighting up as it hacked the transport systems. One guard spotted them, raised his weapon. Dalton and Lysara brought up the rear. Lysara moved faster, her remaining appendages striking like vipers, collapsing his windpipe before he could fire. Inside, Dalton hissed, toward the platform. They piled into the cargo hold as the doors sealed. Moments later, the transport's engines screamed to life and the world tilted as they rocketed toward orbit, toward the platform, toward humanity's last desperate gamble. Krythosian command vessel Eternal Verdict. Kil Mazith watched the reports with growing frustration. 14 more attacks in the last cycle, 3 garrisons overrun, 2 orbital supply ships destroyed by surface-launched missiles. How did they even acquire missile technology? They're escalating, Lysara's replacement analyst reported. Conventional containment is failing. Then we use unconventional methods, Mazith said coldly. He pulled up a file marked Classified Protocol Omega. Sir, the analyst hesitated. That protocol is extreme. It would eliminate not just the insurgency. The entire human population, Mazith finished. Yes, I am aware. The Council will not approve. The Council is 300 light-years away. By the time they receive my report, the problem will be solved. He closed the file. Begin preparations. If humanity wishes to resist, then humanity will be removed. His mandibles clicked with finality. Inform all garrisons. In 72 hours, we deploy biological sterilization protocols across all major population centers. Estimated human casualties 98%. The analyst stood frozen. Do you have a problem, officer? No, sir. Good. Because we are the sovereignty. We bring order to chaos. And if a species refuses to accept that order, he turned back to the view screen, watching Earth spin below. Then that species has no place in our galaxy. In orbit, the harvest platform continued its work, grinding Earth into raw materials. In the cargo hold of a transport ship, 5 humans and 1 defector held their breath as they hurtled toward their target. And somewhere in the depths of space, an empire prepared to commit genocide. The clock was ticking, and humanity's last battalion was running out of time. The cargo transport docked with a hollow metallic clang that reverberated through the hull. Dalton felt the shift in gravity as the platform's artificial systems took over. Heavier than Earth's, calibrated for Krythosian physiology, his knees buckled slightly before compensating. Everyone intact? He whispered into his comm. 4 affirmatives came back. They waited in the darkness of the cargo container as hydraulic systems hissed and whined outside. Footsteps. The distinctive 4-beat rhythm of Krythosian workers passed nearby, voices clicking and modulating in their insectoid language. Lysara's translator whispered, "Manifest verification. Standard procedure. They will not open the containers unless there is a discrepancy." "And if there is?" Kane asked, his weapon ready. "Then we die quickly." "Great. Love the optimism." The footsteps receded. Silence. Then Kira's voice. "We're clear. 30 seconds to move." Amara pulled a plasma torch from her pack, the blue flame hissing to life as she cut through the container's inner seal. Metal peeled away like skin, cold air rushed in, sterile, filtered, smelling of ozone and something bitter. They emerged into the platform's cargo bay. It was vast. A cathedral of industry, stretching hundreds of meters in all directions. Containers stacked like building blocks. Automated loaders moving on magnetic rails, and everywhere, the low thrum of machinery processing Earth's stolen resources. Jesus, Kane breathed. "Stay focused," Dalton ordered. "Lysara, you're on point. Get us to the reactor core." The defector nodded, her antennae twitching as she processed the facility's layout through her neural implants. "This way. Maintenance corridors. Less surveillance." They moved through the station like a cancer spreading through healthy tissue, silent, determined, lethal. Twice they encountered patrol units. Twice Kira's blade and Kane's strength ensured those patrols never reported back. But time was bleeding away. Mazeth stood before the assembled garrison commanders, their holographic forms flickering in the briefing chamber. "Protocol Omega is authorized," he announced. "Deployment commences in 60 hours. All non-essential personnel are to evacuate Earth's surface. Biological weapon dispersal will begin simultaneously across 147 population centers." One commander, older, more cautious, spoke up. "Supreme Arbiter, this action will end the insurgency permanently." Mazeth interrupted. "It will send a message to every species in the sovereignty. Resistance is not defiance, it is suicide. But the resource loss is acceptable. Earth has already provided 73% of projected yield. The remaining extraction can be accomplished with automated systems." His eyes gleamed. "Besides, we will preserve genetic samples. In 300 cycles, we can reseed the planet with a more compliant version of humanity." The commanders fell silent. "Are there any other objections?" "None." "Then prepare your forces, and pray to whatever gods you believe in that the humans die quickly." "They have earned that much?" The holograms dissolved. Mazeth stood alone, staring at Earth's image. For just a moment he wondered if Lysara had been right. Then he dismissed the thought. Order, control, survival of the strongest. That was the Krythosian way. That was the only way. They reached the reactor core after 47 minutes of crawling through maintenance shafts that reeked of coolant and burnt ozone. The chamber was breathtaking. A spherical room 300 meters across. The reactor itself a pulsing sphere of contained antimatter suspended in magnetic fields. Energy danced across its surface like living lightning. The air itself seemed to vibrate with barely contained destruction. "Beautiful," Amara whispered, her eyes wide. "Can you shut it down?" Dalton asked. "Shut it down." "No." She moved to the control console, her fingers flying across the interface. "But I can destabilize it. Trigger a cascade failure. The magnetic containment will collapse, and the antimatter reacts with normal matter," Lysara finished. "Complete conversion to energy. The resulting explosion would vaporize the platform and everything within 100 kilometers. We're inside that radius," Kane pointed out. "We'll need to reach an escape vector before the cascade completes," Amara said, her hands never stopping. Approximately 8 minutes from initiation to detonation, Dalton looked at his team, saw the exhaustion, the wounds, the determination. "Can we make it?" "Unknown," Lysara said honestly, "but the odds improve if—" The door exploded inward. Krythosian soldiers poured through, 10, 15, 20 of them, their plasma rifles blazing. Energy bolts seared the air, turning metal white-hot where they struck. Kane roared, returning fire. His modified weapon tore through the first wave, bodies falling in sprays of alien blood. Kira moved like a dancer of death, her blade finding gaps in armor, severing tendons and sensory organs. But more kept coming. "Amara," Dalton screamed, firing his sidearm. "How long?" 3 minutes. "I need 3 minutes." "We don't have 3 minutes." Then Lysara spoke, her voice calm despite the chaos. "I will buy you time." She moved before anyone could stop her, crossing the chamber in long insectoid strides. Her remaining appendages extended, revealing neural interface ports. She jacked directly into the facility's security grid. Alarms shrieked. Emergency bulkheads slammed down, cutting off reinforcements. Automated defense systems swiveled and opened fire on the Krythosian soldiers. "Go!" Lysara shouted, her body convulsing as she channeled the station's entire defensive network through her nervous system. "I cannot hold this long." Dalton grabbed Amara. "Finish it." Her hands flew across the console. Numbers cascaded down the screen. Red warnings flashed. "Done. Cascade initiated. 7 minutes 50 seconds to detonation. Move!" They ran. Behind them, Lysara screamed as her carapace began to crack, her body unable to handle the data flow. She could feel the station's systems, feel the reactor destabilizing, feel the inevitable explosion building like a star being born, feel her species' mistake finally coming home to roost. Through the pain, she managed to whisper, "I was wrong to wait so long." Then her neural pathways overloaded. She fell, but the bulkheads stayed closed. The soldiers stayed locked out, and humanity's last battalion kept running. 6 minutes to detonation. The hangar bay was chaos. Evacuation sirens wailed as Krythosian workers fled toward escape craft. Automated systems fought failing code, trying to determine if this was a drill or disaster. Dalton's team burst through, weapons empty, bodies bleeding. "There," Kira pointed to a small transport shuttle, its engines already warming. They sprinted across the deck. Behind them, the facility groaned, a deep subsonic sound that vibrated through bones and metal. 4 minutes. They reached the shuttle. Kane tore the doors open, his strength fueled by pure adrenaline. They piled inside. Amara threw herself into the pilot's seat, her hands finding controls she'd only ever studied in stolen manuals. "I've never actually flown one of these," she shouted. "Figure it out," Dalton roared back. The engine screamed. The shuttle lifted, sluggish and ungainly. Plasma fire stitched across the hull as the few remaining soldiers tried to stop them. 3 minutes. The shuttle cleared the hangar, spinning wildly into open space. Through the viewport, Dalton saw the platform, saw it growing brighter, energy leaking from 1,000 failing seals. Saw it starting to tear itself apart. Faster. 2 minutes. The shuttle's engines howled, overheating, warning lights flashing red across every console. 1 minute. Earth filled the viewport. Beautiful, scarred, still spinning in defiance of all who had tried to claim it. 30 seconds. Amara killed the engines. letting momentum carry them into a ballistic trajectory. "Brace!" she screamed. 10 seconds. Dalton closed his eyes, thought of everyone he'd lost, everyone he'd led, everyone who'd believed that maybe, just maybe, this was worth it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The harvest platform exploded. Not with sound, space swallowed that, but with light. Pure, terrible, beautiful light that rewrote the darkness. The antimatter reaction consumed everything, converting mass to energy with perfect mathematical efficiency. The shockwave hit the shuttle like the hand of an angry god, spinning it end over end. Metal screamed. Systems failed. Bodies slammed against restraints. And then, silence. Dalton opened his eyes. They were falling toward Earth, the shuttle's hull glowing cherry red from atmospheric entry. But they were alive. Barely, but alive. Planetside. 37 hours before extinction. The shuttle crashed in what had once been farmland, now just scorched earth and skeletal trees. It carved a furrow half a kilometer long before finally grinding to a halt, its hull crumpled. Engines dead. Frames split open like a broken bone. Dalton came to consciousness slowly, pain radiating from everywhere at once. His left arm hung at a wrong angle. Blood filled his mouth. His vision swam with stars that had nothing to do with the sky above. "Sound off," he managed to croak. "Here." Kane's voice, weak but steady. Broken ribs. Maybe 3. Dislocated shoulder. "Alive," Kira coughed wetly. "Internal bleeding. Not good." "Amara." Silence. Dalton forced himself to turn his head. Saw the pilot's seat, saw Amara slumped forward, her neck bent at an angle that meant only one thing. "Fuck," Kane whispered. They sat in the wreckage, 3 survivors among the dead, as smoke rose into a sky that still bore the fading light of the platform's destruction. Then Kira laughed. A horrible, broken sound. "We did it," she said. "We actually did it." "Yeah." Dalton stared at Amara's body. "We did. But the victory tasted like ash." Krythosian command vessel Eternal Verdict. Kilamazith watched the platform's death through sensors, his compound eyes reflecting the impossible light. Around him, the command center had gone silent. The harvest platform. 300 personnel, 73% of Earth's extracted resources awaiting shipment. Gone. "How?" he asked quietly. No one answered. "How?" His voice cracked like thunder. "Our security was absolute. Our systems impenetrable. How did they?" "Sir?" The tactical officer's voice was small, frightened. "We've identified the breach. It was Internal Affairs Officer Lysara. Her neural signature was detected in the station's security grid moments before the cascade." Kilmazith went very still. "A defector?" "Yes, sir." For a long moment, the Supreme Arbiter said nothing. Then, slowly, he began to laugh, a clicking, chittering sound that held no humor. Only rage. "She was right," he said finally. "Lysara was right. We underestimated them. We treated them like every other conquered species. Assumed they would break." He turned to face his officers. "Accelerate Protocol Omega. Deployment in 12 hours. No evacuation warnings. No mercy. I want every human population center sterilized simultaneously. Every last one." "Sir, that will require—" "I don't care what it requires." Kilmazith's mandibles spread wide. "A threat display. They want war? They want to fight? Then we will show them what the sovereignty does to species that refuse to kneel." Orders cascaded down the chain of command. Across the planet, Krythosian forces mobilized for genocide. Sector 7. The Wastes. Underground command bunker. Word of the platform's destruction spread like wildfire. In hidden bunkers, ruined cities, and mountain strongholds, humanity's scattered cells celebrated. They drank salvaged alcohol, embraced each other, wept with relief and grief and exhausted joy. They had struck back. They had hurt the bastards. For 40 years they had been the victims. Now, finally, they were warriors. But in the command bunker beneath New Jakarta, Dalton Cross felt no joy. He sat alone in the communications room, his broken arms set and splinted, listening to the intercepted transmissions from Krythosian command channels. His team had patched him through military-grade translation software, turning alien clicks into words he could understand. Words like sterilization, biological weapons, 98% casualties. 12 hours. He stared at the console, feeling the weight of every decision he'd ever made pressing down like a physical force. They had won a battle, but in doing so, they had triggered humanity's extinction. The door opened. Kane limped in, his massive frame held together with bandages and spite. "Got something for you, Colonel?" He dropped a data chip on the console. "What is this?" "Lysara's last transmission. She managed to upload it before the end. Encrypted. Took our tech 6 hours to crack." Dalton inserted the chip. Lysara's face appeared broken, carapace cracking, but her eyes still sharp. "Colonel Cross," she said, her translator struggling with damaged vocal systems. "If you are hearing this, then we succeeded. The platform is destroyed. But," she paused, antennae twitching, "I have accessed Kilmazeth's command protocols. He has authorized Protocol Omega, biological extinction. You have 12 of your hours. Perhaps less." Dalton's jaw clenched. "But there is a chance." Lysara's image flickered. "The biological weapons are stored on Kilmazeth's flagship, the Eternal Verdict, deployed via orbital bombardment. If the flagship is destroyed, the protocols cannot be executed. Other vessels carry no such weapons. It was intended as a last resort, a fail-safe." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I am sending you coordinates, transmission frequencies, shield harmonics, everything you need to strike at the heart of the sovereignty. But know this, the Eternal Verdict is the most heavily defended vessel in the fleet. To reach it, you would need to—" Her image stuttered, breaking up. "You would need to do the impossible." But then, a sound that might have been a laugh. "That seems to be what humanity does best." The transmission ended. Dalton and Kane stared at each other. "She's right," Kane said finally. "It's impossible. The flagship is in high orbit, surrounded by destroyers, protected by shields that could tank a nuclear strike. We have no ships, no orbital capability, no way to—" "Yes, we do." Both men turned. Kira stood in the doorway, her face pale, one hand pressed to her wounded side. "Before the war," she said, "before the occupation, we had a defense network. Orbital railgun platforms, kinetic weapons designed to intercept asteroids. They were supposed to protect Earth. The Krythosians would have destroyed them," Kane said. "They destroyed the active ones. The ones that showed up on sensors." Kira pulled up a holographic map. "But there was one platform that never went live. Station Prometheus. It was still in testing when they invaded. Powered down, hidden in the debris field of a shattered moon." She looked at Dalton. "If we could reach it, reactivate it, we'd have a weapon capable of punching through any shield ever made." Dalton studied the map, studied the numbers, the distances, the timing. "How do we get there?" "The same way we got to the Harvest platform." Kira smiled grimly. "We steal a ship." 8 hours before extinction, the raid on the Sydney garrison was brutal and swift. Humanity's cells, unified now under Dalton's command, struck simultaneously at 12 locations. Diversionary attacks, drawing attention, bleeding the Krythosian. While at the garrison's main hangar, 30 fighters died buying time for Dalton's team to board a military transport. They launched under fire, the ship's hull pockmarked with plasma burns, engines screaming as they clawed for altitude. Behind them, the garrison burned. Ahead, the stars waited. Station Prometheus. The defense platform hung in space like a tombstone, dark, cold, a relic of humanity's failed attempt to defend itself. But its reactor core still hummed. Its railguns still gleamed. And when Dalton Cross stepped through the airlock, his boots magnetizing to the deck, he felt something he hadn't felt in 40 years. Hope. "Kira, Kane," he said into his comm. "Get those weapon systems online. We have one shot at this." "And if it doesn't work?" Kane asked. Dalton looked out the viewport at the eternal verdict. A mountain of metal and arrogance, backlit by Earth's blue glow. Then we die knowing we tried. 6 hours before extinction. Krythosian command vessel Eternal Verdict. Kilimazeth stood in the deployment bay, watching as the biological weapons were loaded into bombardment pods. Each pod contained enough engineered pathogens to sterilize 1,000,000 square kilometers. 147 pods. 147 cities. 147 graves. Supreme Arbiter. An officer approached. Hesitant. Long-range sensors have detected unusual activity in the debris field. Thermal signature consistent with what? With a human defense platform. Station Prometheus. We believed it destroyed, but Kulmazeth's mandibles spread. And it's powering up, sir. Its weapons are coming online. For a moment, Kalamazeth felt something almost like admiration. Then he crushed it. Deploy all fighter squadrons, destroy that platform immediately. Sir, the deployment window for Protocol Omega can wait. Kalamazeth roared, I will not let them have another victory. I will not let them think they have a chance. Destroy them. Now. Orders flashed across the fleet, and the Krythosian armada turned its full attention toward the single ancient platform where humanity's last battalion prepared to fire. Station Prometheus. Final hour. The railguns stretched the length of the platform, a kilometer of magnetic coils and capacitor banks, designed to accelerate tungsten slugs to a significant fraction of light speed. It had never been fired. Now as Kira worked frantically at the controls, as Kane manually aligned targeting systems, as Dalton watched the incoming fighter swarm growing larger on sensors, they prepared to make it count. Charge at 70%, Kira announced. 80, 90. They're in weapons range, Kane warned. Incoming fire in 30 seconds. The station shuddered as the first plasma bolt struck home. 95%. 20 seconds. More impacts. Systems failing. Hull breaches on decks 3 through 7. Full charge. Targeting lock acquired. Dalton took a breath. Thought of Amara, who'd died getting them here. Thought of Lysara, who'd betrayed her species for something she believed in. Thought of every human who'd died believing that maybe, just maybe, this mattered. Fire, he said. The railgun spoke with a voice like thunder and lightning having children. The tungsten slug, 3 tons of magnetically accelerated death, left the barrel at 42,000 kilometers per second. It crossed the distance to the eternal verdict in 1.3 seconds. The flagship's shields, designed to deflect energy weapons, tried to adapt. They failed. Kinetic energy doesn't negotiate. The slug punched through the shields, through the hull, through bulkheads and crew quarters and storage bays, through the biological weapons deployment system, through Kilmazeth's command center, where the Supreme Arbiter had just enough time to understand what was happening, and out the other side. The eternal verdict split in half. Secondary explosions rippled along its length as reactor containment failed, as ammunition cooked off, as the biological weapons designed to kill billions found themselves exposed to hard vacuum and simply shelved. The flagship died like a star collapsing, its wreckage scattering across orbit in a slowly expanding cloud of debris. And on Station Prometheus, humanity's last battalion watched in silence as the Krythosian armada, leaderless, shocked, suddenly uncertain, began a slow retreat. The war wasn't over. It would never truly be over. But it had changed. Dalton Cross stood on the observation deck of the reclaimed Beijing garrison, watching as human engineers dismantled Krythosian installations, as soldiers trained in captured weapons, as cities slowly rebuilt. The Sovereignty's grip had loosened. Not broken, never that easy, but loosened. Other species in the Empire had seen what happened when humanity fought back, seen the eternal verdict destroyed, seen the impossible become real. And some of them, just a few at first, began to ask, if humans can resist, why can't we? Kane appeared beside him, 2 bottles in hand. He passed one over. To Amara, he said quietly. To Lysara, Dalton added. They drank in silence. Think we'll win? Kane asked eventually. Dalton looked out at the battered but unbroken planet below. We already did, he said. We proved we can't be broken. That's all the victory that matters. And the rest? The rest? Dalton smiled, a real smile, for the first time in decades, is just us being stubborn. Somewhere in the ruins of New Jakarta, a child was born. Somewhere in the mountains, a resistance cell planned its next strike. Somewhere in the depths of space, a Krythosian officer stared at tactical reports and wondered if maybe, just maybe, the humans were more than anyone had ever imagined. And in orbit around a battered blue-green world, the wreckage of the eternal verdict continued its slow burn across the stars. A monument, a warning, a promise. Humanity doesn't kneel. Humanity doesn't break. Humanity doesn't stop. And in the cold mathematics of galactic empires, that single truth changed everything.